Hello class, this is our video about active reading strategies. Fill in your notes as you watch the video. Pause the video if it's going too quickly in order to be able to fill in all the blanks in your notes. First of all, what is active reading? Well, there's two different kinds of reading. There's active reading and there's fake reading. Active reading is where you have a just right book, a book that is just right for your reading level. Your eyes are moving across the page, pages are turning at a correct rate, you're focused on reading, you're thinking about what you're reading. You use thinking voice when reading, which means there's a voice that you hear telling you this story in your mind. And you work to get unstuck when you're confused. Now, here's fake reading. Just pick any old book, not thinking about what you're reading, random page turning and flipping. You do not stop when confused, eyes skipping around page, and you cannot summarize your reading. So if someone said, "What did you just read?" and you say, "I don't know," that was not active reading. Now, I'm going to get a little bit into some like college level stuff, but I really feel like it's good for you guys to know this information. First of all, there's two types of reading. There's aesthetic mode and there's efferent mode. Aesthetic mode is where you're reading for the pleasure of living through experiences in someone's world. So when you've read a book that you've chosen and you really, really love it, you're in aesthetic mode. You're reading because you are excited about what you're reading. This is called the reading zone. This is reading for its own sake. Psst. Notice reading for its own sake. Make sure that gets in your notes. It's self-paced. You can speed up, skim, skip, or reread. Examples of this would be your independent reading novel. This is a book that you want to read and you're excited to read it. That's aesthetic mode. Efferent mode is reading to gain information for use. So this is from the Latin efferre, which means to carry away, as in to carry away knowledge. You focus on what we are learning, or you focus on what we are learning. It's text-paced, so based on how hard the text is, that decides how fast you're reading. You have to reread, underline, highlight, take notes, look ahead. That's efferent reading. Okay, for example, textbooks, class novels, instructions, manuals, newspapers. These are all things that we read because we have to or we need to gain information. Now, let's talk about some research-based strategies that help someone to be able to read better. The first one is predict. This is where you try to figure out what will happen next and how the selection might end. Then you read on to see if you made good guesses. Some sentence starters for these kinds of thoughts and writing assignments are, I think blank should blank. So if I were blank, I would blank. I think blank will happen next. This will be about, okay? The next type is question. Question what's happening while you read. Searching for reasons behind events and characters' feelings helps you to feel more involved in what you're reading. So some question stems for that are, who is, why does this happen? What is, how are blank and blank different? Okay, so that means you're actually reading because you're trying to figure out what's going on here. Visualize is our third type. See and feel the story movie in your mind. Use your imagination to see the setting, characters, and events. So notice the girl reading in the picture there. Notice that she's obviously reading about a castle and an elf, and she's using her imagination. Okay. Some sentence starters there are, in my mind I see and I can imagine. Clarify. This is stop regularly to review what you understand so far. And expect to have your understanding change and develop as you read on. Make notes about confusing words or statements. Also watch for answers to questions you had earlier. So clarifying is where you're confused about either a word or the information that's being given. It's different than questioning, because questioning, you're just generally interested, and clarifying, you're actually confused, you're not sure about something. So that's the difference between question and clarify. There's some sentence stems there. Does this make sense? What does this mean? Now I see. I still don't get. Is blank the reason why blank? I think and I wonder. Summarize. This is where, in your own words, you restate the most important events or facts in what you read. And this is an important skill. If you can't summarize what you've read, that means you didn't understand it enough, and you might need to go back and reread or read slower or figure out where you got confused. And that would be where you'd need to clarify. But to summarize, you could start with the most important information is, what I need to remember is, what happened in the story is. And now we have connect. And connect is personally with what you're reading. Think of similarities between the descriptions in the selection and what you have personally experienced, heard, or read about. So how does this connect to you? What does this remind you of? Those are the things that you're thinking as you connect. This story reminds me of, I read a book or saw a movie like, I felt like blank when blank, I know someone who, or I remember when. Now, sometimes when you're reading, you run into what we call reading bumps. And a reading bump is where you get distracted and you stop reading. And we call it a bump because you're basically bumped out of your reading zone. So you're into your reading, you're really interested, but sometimes you get bumped out. There are two types of bumps. The first type are called relevant bumps. They connect to the text. An example is you notice something in the story, make a connection to life, like the phrasing of a line or description. You stop to pronounce a new word, predict what will happen next, etc. Okay, these are all perfectly fine bumps because it means that you're thinking about what you're reading. So your response would be simply or aha, and then go back into your reading zone. Now, irrelevant bumps, these are busy thoughts, distracting, random, they're unproductive, they don't help you with your reading. So, for example, if you're reading and you're thinking about lunch or wondering what friends are doing right now, catchy songs stuck in your head, those are irrelevant bumps, and your response is to swat them away. You want to get rid of those thoughts. Our last piece of information is, what do you do when you realize your thinking voice got really quiet? And when we talk about our thinking voice, we're talking about when you are a strong reader, or as you develop as a reader, you begin to hear in your mind your voice or a narrative voice as you read. And that's your thinking voice, the voice inside of you. If it goes really quiet and all of a sudden you can't hear your thinking voice, there's a couple strategies to use here. First of all, see if you can connect to the character. You could think to yourself, oh, I wish I was strong like that, or dang, if I was him, I would have been running. Okay, so what is your reaction to what's happening to the character? Another one is to create pictures of the scene or situation in your mind. Read the book, but make a movie in your mind. So that's that visualizing strategy we talked about. Connect the character or situation to your life or knowledge. Have you felt the same or been in a similar situation like the character? So you're trying to think about, how do I connect to this person? How is this like me or different from my experience? You can ask yourself a question about the page you just read to make sure you're actively reading. You could say something like, why did she diss her friend? Or what's happening here? Okay, and you might have to go back and reread if you're unsure of the answer there. You can make a prediction of what you think will happen based on what you already know about the character. I know they're going to make up at the end. They've been friends forever. Okay, so that's prediction. Maybe they don't make up as friends. Maybe they hate each other forever, but that's a prediction. So these are all important basic strategies for reading, and we're going to be practicing these skills throughout the year. This is the end of your lecture on active reading strategies. Now what I'd like you to do is please move on to the next activity.